God bless you. My name is Pastor Harris Kaklides, and you're watching here in the program Gain to Know Jesus. Some years ago, I tried to program on the internet. It was called "Is the Media Feminizing the Men of the United States?" It was rejected by YouTube due to NBC, and this time I'm going to try to put another program. Is the media brainwashing our youth? To brainwash is to force to accept your ideas or belief, for example, by repeating the same thing many times or by preventing the person from thinking clearly. That's what brainwash means according to Oxford Advanced Learner Dictionary, and that's what the media is doing. The following I wish you to see is some clips.
Main purpose
Yuri Bizminov is a former KGB agent.
follows the statement of a very ancient Chinese philosopher, Sun Tzu, who was born 500 years BC, before Jesus Christ, who said something to the effect that fighting war on a battlefield is the most stupid and primitive way of fighting a war. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in your enemy's country, be it moral traditions, religion, respect to your authority and leaders, cultural traditions, anything. Put white against black, old against young, I don't know, wealthy against poor, and so on. Doesn't matter. As long as it disturbs society, as long as it cuts the moral fiber of a nation, it's good. And then you just take this country, when everything is subverted, when the country is disoriented and confused, when it is demoralized and then destabilized, then the crisis will come.
Entertainment shows on television have been criticized for decades as being too violent for children. But what about violence on television news shows and their effect on kids?
Two new university studies show the effect is often frightening, with 51% of children in one study saying that they can recall being scared by TV news footage. Joining us now to talk about this and the effects on children is Kevin Dwyer of the National Association of School Psychologists. Good morning. Welcome to you.
Good morning.
What exactly was the basis of these studies or the outcome here, the final conclusion?
Well, the outcome is that many children are shocked and frightened by some of the things that they see on news on television. You know, television news, sometimes the saying goes that, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. And I think that those kinds of television, shocking television, affect children, particularly very young children who can't discriminate between that happening in a news show versus that happening on their own street or in their own community.
Within the KGB is a department that specializes in planting false stories and forged documents to distort others' perception of reality. It is the department that deals in disinformation. Department A of the KGB set up and controls the disinformation department of Czech intelligence. Ladislav Bittman was deputy director of that department when he was with Czech intelligence.
Disinformation can have a variety of forms. It's basically an information deliberately misleading that is leaked through a variety of channels to the opponent to deceive him, to deceive the decision makers in the United States or Germany or Britain, or it can be a disinformation to deceive the public opinion around the world or in a specific country.
You got to be fairly good at this when you were with Czech intelligence, didn't you?
Unfortunately, I have to admit, yes.
I was strolling on the moon one day. No, dadgummit. I'm going to try a little sand trap shot here.
Those pictures from the moon, they captivated the world and recorded a seminal moment in human history.
That's one small step for man.
but they're also pivotal to one of the more outrageous conspiracy theories.
The Eagle has landed.
Many say we never went to the moon, that it was all staged by NASA in some remote Nevada desert. Why, they ask, are there no stars visible in the lunar sky?
Well, actually, you can see the stars pretty well from up here. It's just that they don't show up at home on your TV very well. Well, obviously, NASA would have used more sophisticated trickery than we just used here. But the point is, image manipulation is possible, and it is our ever-increasing ability to doctor images to make the unreal seem real that has provided so much ammunition for conspiracy theory.
Look at what we are being taught in our schools. For example, the teaching company, science and mathematics, how they're teaching evolution in our schools, especially in our colleges.
Called The Enemy Within, or the Self-Inflicted Wound. We're going to take a very careful look at cancer. We'll see how the very nature of life on Earth, how our evolution and transformation from the most primitive chemicals went hand in hand with our susceptibility to cancer. Life on Earth has its information transmitted by DNA. It's the custodian of the genetic and reproductive functions. And if this were a stable molecule, which DNA isn't, such as water or salt, takes huge energy to disrupt water or salt. But DNA is fragile. If it were stable, then we would still be in that primordial soup. Nothing would change. Those chemicals that made up DNA would stay locked and no mutations could occur. But DNA is very fragile, very complex, and so it's easily mutable, which means changeable. And this fragility brings with it the chance for mutations that can evolve from the lowest to the highest forms and ultimately to real intelligence. But it's a two-edged sword, because there can be changes which are not so desirable with DNA. So this change, which brings cells into a state where they become aggressive and not good neighbors, is something we call cancer. It's an internal threat at the molecular level, and it's using survival of the fittest to get ahead and ultimately to destroy the host, which happens to be us. We'll look at the causes from our environment, which is why I call this the self-inflicted wound. We'll look at genetic susceptibility and the molecular mechanisms as well as the cellular defects that are in cancer. And we'll look at the possibilities for prevention and cure and review prototypes in various stages of evolution in the bringing to our body of cancer from within. We'll look at all the possibilities and how we might get away with this and the differences in our treatment. And
Look at how evolution programs attack the Bible and how they take some formation of rocks and they make it sound like the way a rock is in a certain direction, how that proves the world took millions of years to make, where in reality they haven't been alive millions of years or thousands of years to know that rock formation took so many millions of years or thousands of years to be made. It's just guesses and it's just theories, but they'll attack the Bible and they'll believe in any little thing so they won't believe the scriptures.
Planet Earth is unique. An immense ball of rock
25,000 miles around. It is a refuge. 1/3 land, 2/3 water, and with an atmosphere rich in oxygen, it is the only known home in the universe for living creatures. But this blue-green oasis has not always been so welcoming. The planet bears the scars of a traumatic past, a past of extreme environments and extreme catastrophes. Over the course of nearly 5 billion years, it has been a changing world. A world of fire, a world of ice, one of raging seas and poisonous skies. The life forms that now cling to its surface are the lucky survivors of a succession of deadly mass extinctions. For just over 200 years, determined scientists have explored the planet and unearthed its secrets. Their remarkable discoveries have led them to tell an incredible story, the story of how the Earth was made. For thousands of years, humans had no knowledge of the true age and origin of the world. But just over 200 years ago, all this would change. Scotland, the Edinburgh coast. It was here, one day in 1788, that the discovery of a small rocky outcrop would completely rewrite the history of the Earth. Geologist Geoffrey Bolton is on his way to the desolate Siccar Point, where this discovery was made by a maverick Scottish farmer, James Hutton. Hutton was to become the father of modern geology.
Hutton was a man who was enthusiastic in the pursuit of truth, a very inquiring mind. When he took over his father's farm, he saw underneath the soils rocks and wondered what these were.
Hutton spent years obsessed with understanding how the rocks of the Earth were made. His intrepid field expeditions took him all over Scotland, and they led him to realize that extremely slow processes could create the rocks he saw from layers of sediment.
He rode miles and miles on his horse to go places where he thought he could find exciting geological experiences, even though he suffered terribly from saddle sores.
Hutton concluded that rocks could take hundreds of thousands of years to form, but his claims were speculative, and his radical ideas flew in the face of the accepted version of Earth history, provided by the Church. For generations, the Christian Church had been the sole authority on all creation, based on the book of Genesis. And using the biblical genealogies, church leaders were now confidently claiming they knew the exact age of the Earth itself.
Archbishop Usher in the 17th century had calculated that the Earth was 6,000 years old, and indeed he calculated that it was made on October the 14th in the afternoon.
Hutton was convinced that the Earth had to be much older. And when his explorations led him to Siccar Point in 1788, he would finally find the proof he was looking for in the unusual formation he discovered.
These rocks are not just any old rocks, they're very special rocks, and the reason they're special is because of the story Hutton was able to tell from them.
Here, two layered rock formations stand at right angles to each other.
He knew these rocks had once been laid down horizontally on the sea floor. They must then have been buried under great depth to recrystallize. They must then have been tilted on end by great earth forces. Then they were eroded away and truncated. Then these rocks were deposited on top. And he realized that that would not take hundreds of years, nor thousands of years, but many millions of years.
Hutton's
There's no proof that God exists. Isn't it just a matter of faith? Let me share a theory with you. It's an intellectually stimulating theory. It's my theory of where the Coca-Cola can may have come from. Billions of years ago, there was this massive explosion in space. Nobody knows what caused this explosion. It just happened. Going through space was this large chunk of rock. On top of the rock was this sweet, bubbly substance. Now, over billions of years, aluminum crept up the side and trapped some of it in a can, formed itself into a lid, and then a tab. And then over millions of years, red paint fell from the sky, white paint, a little bit of green paint, and formed itself into the words, Coca-Cola, 12 fluid ounces, do not litter. You say, man, what are you doing? You're insulting my intellect. And so I am. You know, if the Coca-Cola can is designed, it must have a designer. To believe that this happened by sheer chance is to move into an intellectual free zone. It's to have an echo when you think. It's to have brain liposuction.
The question is, how are World War II and evolution related? When I think of World War II, the first person who comes to mind is the notorious Adolf Hitler and his Nazi, or National Socialist Party. He wrote a book, too, letting us investigate his own thoughts about life. And his book is called Mein Kampf, translated in English as My Struggle, published in 1925, ironically, the same year of the Scopes monkey trial. It was 720 pages long, it contained some of the most devious rhetoric of a racist in the most extreme sense. During World War II, from 1939 until 1945, 73 million people died. And get this, of those 73 million people, 60% were civilians. 60%. It's been called the deadliest conflict in history. As World War II began, Hitler's deadly philosophy emerged in his brutal treatment of humanity. Adolf Hitler and Charles Darwin have a lot in common. With both books, one can learn much about their relationship, even though they never met each other, Hitler being born in 1889, 7 years after Darwin's death in 1882. They didn't know each other, they never met each other, but they had a relationship that's closer than you might think. You say, what do evolution and World War II have in common? We're going to tie the knot today, and it's amazing. It's incredibly clear. Remember that evolution infiltrates society with moral chaos. World War II is a prime example of that. It affected Hitler and others' view of life. The life of the unborn and the life of the liabilities to society, as they would call it, or call them. Those who offered or provided an improvement to society as a whole, if they weren't benefiting the common good, then they lost their worth as a human being. This is an advertisement in a German magazine during the rise of Hitler. At the bottom right, you'll see NSDAP there in that cursive writing there. That NSDAP stands for the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which was a political party, the Nazi Party, National Socialist, Nazi. And this was a propaganda poster, or not poster, but advertisement put in a magazine called A New People. And that's what those two big white words say, Neues Volk. That says New People. The translation is this: 60,000 Reichsmarks. 60,000, that's their currency, okay? So that's a money term at the top. Reichsmarks was their German currency, and that equals today, with inflation including an American currency, about $216,000. So you get the idea of what they're saying here, okay? 60,000 Reichsmarks. This is what this person, right here, this guy in the black, sitting on the chair, suffering from hereditary defects, costs the community of Germans during his lifetime. To them, to the Nazis, to those that believe in evolution, the logical end of evolution is this: a view of life that is so shallow that people that, yes, have innate worth are worthless. and they're cast away. And here they're put up as a liability to society to get the whole of mankind, the whole of their state, to turn against them and look at them as a problem instead of a blessing.